Good afternoon, everyone. I am Michael Steelman, Director of Alumni Career Management and Professional Networks at W&M Mary, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this afternoon's webinar, Learn to Innovate at a Higher Level. Today's webinar is part of W&M Mary's series of webinars and is made possible by the support of the W&M Mary Alumni Association. As we seek to provide relevant programming for our lifelong commitment to our alumni, we welcome any feedback and ideas to make this a valuable resource for you. Today's presentation is being recorded, and we will notify registrants once the recording is available. Just a few housekeeping items before I introduce our guest presenter. It is important to note that if you are experiencing any audio or video difficulties, to please call the Adobe Connect technical support number at 1-800-422-3623. Also, questions are welcome throughout today's presentation. Our presenter will answer as many questions as time will allow at the end of his presentation. Just submit your questions by typing in the box on the right side of the screen next to the PowerPoint presentation. Throughout the webinar, I will monitor the questions and share them with our presenter at the end of his presentation. Now, it's my great pleasure to introduce our guest presenter today. Darin Eich is the author of Innovation Step by Step: How to Create and Develop Ideas for Your Challenge and Root Down and Branch Out Best Practices for Leadership Development Programs. His expertise is in designing and facilitating leadership programs, innovation training, conferences, and events that are innovative initiatives. He designs activities, tools, and programs for organizations to foster a culture of innovation. He helps leaders and organizations to collaboratively innovate by learning how to do it for their real challenges while working on a real project. Darin lives in Madison and has a PhD from the University of Wisconsin, as well as a Master's of Education from our very own School of Education at W&M Mary. His practical research and simple writing zeroes in on how people can learn leadership and innovation through programs, courses, retreats, and new emerging methods to contribute to an innovation culture. Darin is the founder of Innovation Learning, LLC, and was the president and co-founder of Brain Reactions, an innovation and idea generation company founded with a leadership program student that has gone on to be recognized by U.S. News and Business Week. Darin has also worked to establish Innovation Trip and innovationtraining.org, a top innovation training website that offers web-based workshops. We are truly delighted to have Darin join us this afternoon to share his expertise with the W&M Mary tribe. Thank you so much, Darin.
All right. Thank you very much, Michael. Good to be here. Good to be connected to my fellow alums from Madison, Wisconsin. I wish I was in the Berg. I wish we were in the same room together doing this. How great would that be? So we're going to zero in on an experience today about learning to innovate at a higher level. And what I'd love to do is see where I should put some emphasis. What would you like to focus on? What might you like to learn? What outcomes might like you to experience today with this webinar? We can zero in on the innovation skills that you can learn, the innovation mindset to cultivate, about taking new action, about the innovation process, or all of the above. So if you were interested in something, what might it be? What focus might it be? So it looks like we've got a lot of responses coming in. I'm loving it. It's shifting. It's changing. All right. So this is my goal here today is let's do this interactive style. Let's have maybe a number of polls and some reflective activities that you can do. So let's see what we've got for results. So it looks like innovative mindset has 47.83% of the interest. That's number one. And innovation skills has 17.3%. That's the least. So we're going to focus on mindset today during this webinar, but we'll also touch on all of these other things as well. So thanks for executing that poll, Michael. So when we're thinking about innovation, it's usually about doing something new, doing something that has an impact, something we might have to learn how to do. Because everything, keeps moving forward in our society, it seems like. But how do we also move up? How do we move to a higher level? How do we leverage this concept of innovation to create and to develop something new that can have an impact for us or even for our organization? So with this webinar, I'm going to experiment with some little innovations, try some new things that I've never tried before. And one thing that I love is I saw this 1% rule of internet culture, where essentially what it means is, let's say there's a website. There's about 1% of the people are the creators. So that's the person that's created the website, that blog post article or this webinar, people like me and Michael who are bringing this on. And then there's another percentage that are contributors. Maybe 9% are contributors. These are people that are, answering polls. They are chatting over questions. They are submitting answers, things like that. But most of the people out there are what's called as lurkers. They're just kind of having this on in the background and lurking and observing. So our goal today is let's have it like William and Mary style, where we're all contributing. We're co-creating this webinar together. So by helping me with these polls and chatting over any questions that you have as we go, my goal is that, hey, we'll get a lot of questions and we'll be able to see what themes emerge from the questions, and I can speak to some of those themes. And we'll also have some activities and to be able to chat over a quick experience you had from William and Mary or something like that. So that's our goal, is how do we get to a higher level of innovation even as a participant in this webinar? So as we're going, think of any questions that you have, and our approach to take here today is almost just how do we get a thought into our mind, a question in our mind, and get it out there, not even knowing that it may even be answered, but it might be a data point. It might be a number of questions that we can see themes that emerge from our audience and be able to speak to those. So don't be afraid to ask any question at any time. We might not even answer it. Hopefully we will. Hopefully we'll get to a bunch of themes too. And you'll be able to do that in the Q&A box. So the thing I'm going to spend the least amount of time on today in the webinar is skills, because you said that's what you wanted the least of in the poll. But one thing that was kind of a motivator for me to do this webinar on this topic was I kept seeing all these studies come out about what are the most critical skills needed in our society right now. The world of work is changing so rapidly. Society is changing so rapidly. New technologies, new disruptions. What kind of skills do people need to have? Leaders, people that are employees in the organization. And the American Management Association found these were the 4 critical skills. Skills of critical thinking or problem solving, right? How do you see what problems are out there, see the complexity of it? But it's just not enough to think critically. You have to solve the problems. And that takes skills like communication, not only communicating online and in some of our new methods we've got a new method here, a webinar, but also in very traditional methods. How do you have a one-on-one meeting with somebody? Things like that. Collaboration. This innovation stuff doesn't really happen by yourself in a garage or in a basement like you hear the fables. It happens with others. It happens co-creating with others, collaborating with others. So how do you develop your skill to do that, to find collaborators and collaborate with others? And then also the skill of creativity. If we've got problems, how do we create ideas? How do we create potential solutions? And once we have those potential solutions created, how do we communicate them and find collaborators to help us to do that? So these are really important skills. And since that time period when I saw this AMA study, I've seen other studies. IBM had a study about creativity being the #1 skill that CEOs thought was important. Bloomberg recently did a big study of thousands of recruiters trying to identify what skills were the most in demand by organizations, but the least common. And again, it was skills like this. It was creative problem solving, strategic thinking, critical thinking, collaboration, communication. And the World Economic Forum also did a similar very large study and released a report about the skills that were most needed in our age now. And it was skills like this. So how do you, focus in on these skills? How do you learn these skills, develop these skills to higher levels? And for me, when you bring all of these skills together, that's when you're creating an innovation. Because to create an innovation, you need to think critically. You need to see what problem exists that you might be able to solve. You need to use your creativity to create ideas or potential solutions. You need to collaborate with others to develop those ideas. You probably won't be able to do it on your own. And then you need to communicate. That's the difference between innovation and creativity, is you actually have to launch it and take action on it. It has to have an impact in the world and be of value. It can't just be an idea on paper, and that takes communication. So we'll think about these skills. So get these skills in your mind, the 4 C skills, because soon we'll think about how you use these skills and how you yourself learn these skills, especially at William and Mary, since we've got a homecoming-focused webinar. Well, one thing I was interested in was, how do people learn these skills? How do people learn how to innovate? So recently I did a study of myself where I found over 100, I'll call them innovator leaders, from a wide variety of organizations, businesses, tech companies, healthcare, government, universities, people that had a role in trying to help their organization to innovate and help others to learn it. And the key finding that I got from interviewing over 100 of these folks was based on kind of this model that I love from Edgar Dale, the cone of learning. To develop these kinds of skills like creativity and problem solving and communication and collaboration, we can't just read about it. We can't just hear about it. We might be able to remember a little bit more and learn more if we hear and see like a webinar format, but ultimately we've got to do it. If we want to learn how to innovate at a higher level, we have to do it. We have to do innovation. We have to create and develop new ideas that we actually launch and take action on with others to be able to develop those skills and to learn how to do it. So my goal during this webinar is, hey, how do we help you think about how you might want to develop these skills? And maybe is there an innovation project, a challenge you'd like to take on, a problem you'd like to solve, a way you'd like to leverage your expertise and create something, make something as a result, not only for the purpose of developing your skills, but also creating something real that can have an impact, a real innovation. So I mentioned I did interviews, and that for me is a powerful way to learn something, is how do you find people that are doing something you would like to do? For me, it was finding people who are innovator leaders and finding them on LinkedIn and contacting them one by one and emailing them and doing a 30-minute to 1 hour long interview with them. So this might be a project you might like to do in your life too. It's like, who is at that level that you think is next for you or you'd like to be next at? And could you interview people about how they're learning it, how they're doing it? Many times people love to talk about this. So for instance, if I was interviewing you, if I wanted to learn from you about how you've learned and developed some of your skills of creativity, of problem solving, of critical thinking, of collaboration, and of communication, what would you say? What would your answer be? More importantly than that, what would some experiences be that you would share with me where you really learned how to do some of these things, how you really learned to develop some of your own innovation skills? You learned how to create, problem solve, communicate, collaborate, and these are skills we keep on learning and developing. But what is coming into your mind right now? What's in your mind, right? And I love this Janus model here, right? When we look into the past, we look into the future at the same time. So if we can look into our past at some of those times when we've really developed these skills, we've used these skills, we've innovated, we've created and developed something new with others. We had to communicate it, we had to collaborate with others, we had to think critically, we had to solve a problem. What were some of those times, and how do we do more of that in our future? Maybe in that same vein or along that same path, right? So if you were to think about an innovation timeline in your life, where obviously there's a place we'd like to get to in the future, we'd like to be at maybe a higher level in terms of our innovation doing and learning. But we have a past, and this is where I'd like to focus right now, especially zeroing in at your time at W&M Mary. If you were to think, what were some experiences I had at W&M Mary where I got to create an innovation? And we're not looking at a huge innovation like a virtual reality or a big startup company. We're looking at just a little thing, something new and different you'd never done before, but you did it and had an impact, right? Maybe you created something, you made something, you started something, right? What would be some of those experiences at W&M Mary that you can think of? A time when you might have started something. It could have been a part of a class. It could have been something you did off campus in the community. It could have been something you did that was related to a hobby. It could have been something you did related to a job or a service initiative or any kind of project that you did where you created something, right? What comes to your mind as some experiences on your timeline? So if you have some paper in front of you right now, or you can also just look at the screen and think about this, is what are some of those experiences? So there are maybe 2 to 3 or 4 coming to your mind right now. And then the next goal is, okay, take one of those experiences and is there an origin story in there, right? Like all superheroes have an origin story. So was there a big innovation story, a big experience that happened for you at W&M Mary that maybe influenced what you do now, right? It's something that really catalyzed your learning and development of those critical innovation skills of creativity, of communication, collaboration, problem solving. So, what is a story that you think emerges from one of those experiences you had? So, maybe what you did was you created a new solution. Maybe you created a new program or a service or an event or a new method or a new product, right? It was something that, as a result of creating this and doing this, you had to learn, and it took your skills to a higher level. You had to think critically and strategically. You had to create, you had to communicate, and you had to collaborate, right? So, what is an experience that comes to your mind? So, as you have something that comes to your mind, there should be a quick little poll that we have where you can chat that over. Just engage with us and chat over what was that experience. If you were to describe it in like tweet size, in 140 characters or in a sentence or two, what was a key innovation experience you had at William and Mary? An experience where you got to maybe create something or develop something or start something. It had an impact, right? It had real value for yourself or for others. But type in something that is coming to your mind. It might have been, for many people, it's an involvement they had outside of the classroom. So for me, one thing that I like to do is create a mind map. And you'll see this on the screen. So I had an experience that was, I got the chance, I had something that I wanted to do. I wanted to design a leadership program that was open to students on campus. So I ended up creating this leadership program. And I did it by talking to some folks at William and Mary, some professionals about, hey, how can I start this? I ended up getting sponsorship of it from the Student Affairs Division and a couple of entities in there, partnered with a bunch of other professionals who recommended students that I could involve in helping me to design this program and facilitate it and kick it off. And we ended up creating a series of workshops, maybe 9 workshops during the semester that were about an hour and a half long each, presented by different people. And if students presented or attended a number of the workshops, they would earn a certificate. So that was like my first experience ever like designing and launching a leadership program, especially from scratch, where I had to get people involved from scratch. I had to figure out, how do I get people to attend it? How do we get it funded? All kinds of things like that. So for me, that was a really powerful experience. I'd never done that before. But because I did that experience, I think I learned some of these skills, creativity for a real purpose, right? What kind of workshops, creating a program, creating marketing ideas, communicating, collaborating. And since that point, I've gone on to do a lot of other things. I've created more leadership programs, including one program that was a little different that's reached over 1 million people. So all of that was made possible because of having the chance at William and Mary to create an innovation that I was interested in. So it looks like others have some really cool experiences they've had. Maybe you've had similar ones, developing a business valuation model from scratch. See, I like that because that's a key element. How do you build something from scratch? Service learning class inspired me to try new things and work with mentors, spurred involvement in everything else. Service learning is a great place to do this because sometimes you're dealing with some real problems in our society and you're working to provide solutions and help. That's innovation. A day student formed a group to assist other day students, commuters, with connecting with resident students. So saw an opportunity or a problem, right? How do we connect with the larger campus and let's create something, let's do something. An interdisciplinary major, just a lot of great experiences coming in. I'm remembering a lot of these kinds of things. Convince an academic committee of the value of a new major. Like that's a kind of a bigger thing, right? Creating community service partnerships with a sorority that involve tutoring elementary school students. I love it that we're creating the partnership, creating the collaboration, right? Run a crowdsourcing challenge to get creative solutions ideas. This is a more recent grad, right? Because crowdsourcing wasn't something that we've had 30 years ago, right? Being a member of a research team, collaboration of ideas, drafting a small business guide for veterinarians, writing a geological mapping software, identifying the need. I love it. So keep chatting over those experiences as you're thinking of them. Because if we can look back at some of those experiences and break them down, we can see that we can keep doing this, we can keep learning this, we can keep developing this and take it to the next level for the future. So for me, I got so excited about this first experience that I'm like, I did a graduate degree at W&M Mary. So I'm going to go to earn a PhD and I'm going to study the same thing that experience kind of lit me on fire with, high impact leadership program. So I ended up doing a dissertation on that and creating a book about that. And that was all because of having that experience of starting something at W&M Mary, getting to the practical world, not just writing papers or taking tests, but actually doing the messy work of creating something. And then while at the University of Wisconsin, that led me to start a company where we created a startup company where we recruited the most creative students that we could find from the University of Wisconsin, train them on brainstorming, idea generation, and then we would do projects where we would create ideas for organizations like BMW or P&G or the United Nations. Then that became a book too, that experience, showing that method. So all of these things were made possible from an experience at W&M Mary where I started something and had to learn something. So how do we do more of that then in the future? So we're getting almost to that mindset stage, right? How do we do more of that in the future? Maybe we've stagnated a bit, or maybe we've kept pushing the pedal to the metal, creating new things, developing new things. But how do we learn really effectively? We may not have as much time as we did in the past. So how do we do that? Well, going back to the interviews that I did of these innovator leaders, they didn't share very much about taking tests or reading just for the sake of reading, but they were all readers. And when they were reading something, they were reading for the purpose to gain new methods, a new thing they could actually do, not just think about or critique, but a new method that they could actually do. So I think that's a key difference. So the next step, obviously, is after you read some of these books, is try the new methods you read. And there are some books that are really great ones for learning innovation. So anything around design thinking is really interesting right now to a lot of people. And this is a design process that's really quite simple, where you're trying to learn about your audience you're designing for. So let's say the big innovation you want to do next in your life is turn your expertise into a book that could help people with something, solve some kind of problem. Well, the first stage of that is finding out who this audience is, what they want, what they need, gaining empathy for them, hearing them, listening to them. And that is where you start. You don't really start with you. You start with this audience that you would like to serve or to help. And then you define what the problem is or what you can do. Then you generate a lot of ideas, and then you create prototypes. And then you test it. So prototype could be, if you're going to do a book, you may not need to create the whole book, but could you create a blog post and get that in front of people to see what their response is to it, what they liked, or a series of blog posts and which get better response than others, right? So you don't need to create the whole thing and then surprise people with it, right? You build it with people. You collaborate with people as you go. The design thinking process. So another book that's popular and a method is the lean startup, right? So this is about the lean methodology is pretty popular in a lot of places. There's lean healthcare, lean Six Sigma, lean everything. How do we eliminate waste, do things faster? And it's applied to startups. And a lot of people, when they're innovating and creating that new thing, they want to be a little bit more like a startup. So even applying to the own innovation you might have in your own life, like if you want to create a book. And there's a process that will help you, sell it before you build it, is what I call. How do you know that you'll have an audience that will want this, you can use this, before you invest a lot of time and money in building it? So how do you kind of build it as you go with your users, right? And learn as you go. So this is another one to maybe think about, lean startup. Google that and check that out if that's of interest to you. So those are a couple of basic processes and methods, design thinking and lean startup, that are really popular and also valuable for people who are at a higher level of innovation learning and doing that I interviewed. And the third area is this. There are only so many new ideas you can come up with, right? But there are new technologies that are always being created, always being developed, always being readily available. So a lot of the opportunity now for innovation and to take it to the next level is by applying a technology, a new technology. And this is a classic, you've probably seen this, the technology adoption life cycle. So how do you get a little bit further up this cycle, right? If you're in the late majority, how do you get to be the early majority? If you're early majority, how do you get to be early adopters, right? Or if you're an early adopter, how do you become an innovator? And for me, it's not that important to be the super early adopter innovator, but to be in this red zone here of an early adopter, or at least in the early majority, is good because it means you're leveraging the new technology, you're using it, right? So how do you do it a little bit quicker? So let's say you spend a lot of time on websites, right? But you've never developed a website before or built a website before. How can you move up? And maybe that could be an innovation project, is building your own website or maybe a mobile app. Some of these things are a lot easier than they seem. And by learning how to do it, it might enhance some of your skills here. But this is a key piece here, the technology piece. How do you adopt technology? Because a lot of the best ideas now, the new ideas, are applying a technology. And you don't need to be the inventor of the technology, but how do you apply it? How do you use it for your benefit and the benefit of others or your organization? Technology adoption, right? Are you doing things mobile, right? We're looking for those mobile moments. We're in a mobile world. Maybe you've got a website, but have you leveraged the mobile device that people are spending so much more time on, right? Maybe you're doing this webinar on a mobile device. Can you design a webinar or a program for a mobile device? Those are examples. And also another key thing that people that were kind of at that higher level of innovation learning were doing was observing and connecting. They're always looking around. They're always looking for problems, always looking for solutions, always looking at what other people were doing, other organizations. What is Amazon doing? Is there a way that we can do that in my organization, something similar? And making the connections. And people have been doing this forever. Like, I love this image of the Ferris wheel from the, I think it was 1893 Chicago World's Fair, right? Each one of those cars is an actual train car. It's that big, right? And that was kind of the saving grace for the Chicago World's Fair, because the previous World's Fair was in Paris and they had the Eiffel Tower. So when they were collecting ideas for the thing that they could do at the Chicago World's Fair to make it distinctive, a lot of the ideas were towers, bigger towers, taller towers. But then a guy named Ferris was out and about in the late 1800s, and he saw a big bicycle with a big bicycle wheel, and he made a connection. He thought about that as a metaphor for, okay, what if people could ride on the ends of those scopes? What if we could make a bigger version of that and spin it? And that became the Ferris wheel, which was the saving grace for the World's Fair, right? So that's the thing, is how do you be out there observing and connecting to learn and do innovation at a higher level? And another term that keeps coming up when you're looking at the most important skills, and this was from, I think, the Bloomberg study I looked at, was strategic thinking, right? Is like thinking about not just the current problems and the current complexity, but what could be done in the future? What could you do? What is the vision for the future? What is a new and different thing that could be done in the future that has value? And for me, I like to think about strategic alignment. So if you're looking at your own life and the innovations you might like to create, like the innovation project you might like to do, for example, could it fit with a lot of things? Could it be a fit with your own specific strengths or skills, something that you're good at? Could it also be something you're passionate about, a passionate interest you have, right? Because sometimes we're good at something, but we're not passionate about it, or sometimes we're passionate about something, but not great at it. Could it also matter to the world, and it's important for your values? It provides real value, because sometimes it doesn't. And also, here's the tricky part that a lot of people miss, is if you're thinking about creating a new innovation or starting something, do you have access to funding or resources for that? If it's going to solve a big problem, are you able to access funding or resources for it? A grant, is it able to generate revenue? Something like that. A lot of people miss this piece when they're thinking about what they could do, their project. So that's something to think about too. And the innovator leaders I interviewed, they were thinking about the strategy. They were thinking about what their business is about, their organization is about. What is its mission? What is its purpose? What innovations could they work on could fit with that, right? So now I would love to zoom into the thing that people were most interested in, the innovative mindset. And I'm glad that you were interested in this one, because this is my favorite one too. And it's one that I've been really getting into a lot lately. Because when I do work with organizations, generally they have an innovation initiative, and they're bringing me in to help them with that, or help make their organization more innovative and move from a place that's maybe a good execution organization where they're good at doing the thing again and again and again, doing it the right way, right? To more of an innovative organization where it may not necessarily, where now you want to do the thing right, but you also want to do the right thing, and the right thing might be a new thing, right? And people sometimes are used to just getting the assignments and doing the thing the right way and trying to figure out what the right way is versus, hey, there might be a lot of different ways to do this, and it might be messy to start. So how do we have an innovative mindset, and how do we help others to have a mindset that is innovative as well? So how do we break this down? Well, if innovative means using or showing new methods, ideas, etc., and a mindset is like a mental attitude or a disposition, right? How do we combine those two? And an innovation then is the result of this innovative mindset. We want to create innovations. We want to create or introduce something new or different, right? So how do we have a mindset that's more open to using the new methods, doing the new things, creating something new or different, right? So if you were to mind map this, on a sheet of paper, what does that innovative mindset look like to you? If you were to, you could even chat that into the chat box. Um, so we're not a poll yet, Michael. So we'll just think about this as a reflective activity, or if there's a way to chat it in, you can. So what does an innovative mindset look like to you? So if you think of yourself at your best, when you have that innovative mindset, uh, how would you describe that attitude or that mindset, or how you think about yourself? Maybe you could mind map that right now on a sheet of paper if you have that handy, or at least think about it. For me, you might have some similar thoughts where an innovative mindset means, maybe if I don't know how to do something right now, I can learn how to do it. I can solve problems. I can respond to change. I can risk. I can fail. I can try again. I can be focused on a process. I can get into action. I can try something different. I can create, build, make. I can experiment. I'm always looking for a better way for everything. I can apply new technologies. I'm seeking them. I want to learn them, even if it's messy at first. I want to develop new skills, seek opportunities, be purposeful and strategic. I want to grow through innovation and not just improvement. I want to collaborate with others. I want to not be perfect, but somewhat effective. I want to do less judging of myself. I want to iterate to improve, and I want to scale up too, right? I don't just want to do something for the first time, but I want to scale it so it has a larger impact. So what is coming into your mind? Maybe some of these things you can relate with when you think about your own innovative mindset at its best. And this varies. Some days I have an innovative mindset, or some hours, and other times I don't. I might have more of a conventional mindset, don't risk, a little bit more fear in there. So for you, what is coming into your mind if you're on a screen of paper, mind mapping that or chatting that over too? This is going to help us. What does an innovative mindset look like to you? And I know if we were in a William and Mary classroom right now and we asked that question, you could list a lot of things. And this mind mapping is a tool I like to use for things like this. It's fun on paper. It's fun with Post-it notes as well, where you can move them around and see the categories. And I also like apps to do this. There's a free app that I like called MindJet, where I like to build little mind maps like this. That's one I used there. So an innovative mindset. So next, I'd like to now think about the innovation process and where you might get stuck, because I think everybody gets stuck sometimes. I was in Silicon Valley last week at Google and another really innovative company in Palo Alto, and that's a whole nother world out there, you know what I mean, in terms of innovation. And they speak about the Silicon Valley way and the Silicon Valley work ethic and the approach to innovation. They're always innovating. They'll bang something out rapidly. So it's pretty impressive, actually. So if you were to think about your own mindset And where do you tend to get stuck when you're trying to create or develop a new innovation? Or maybe you have a new thing you're working on. Maybe it's a book. Maybe you want to create a new website or a new product or a new service or a new program. Where do you get stuck? And I'll talk you through this based on this image. So sometimes people have a hard time even getting started, right? Not being open to seeing the challenges, the problems, the opportunities that are out there. Just kind of waiting for somebody to assign them, hey, here's the challenge, here's the problem, do this, right? So sometimes that's a place that a lot of people get stuck, and that's a lot of the work I do in organizations. So a lot of times then, some people, they see these challenges, they see the problems, they see the opportunities, but for some reason they just get stuck in that critical thinking mode and don't get into the creative thinking mode of thinking of ideas and solutions for the challenges, right? So sometimes people get stuck there. They don't think of the ideas and solutions, right? And then other times, people can think of ideas and solutions, but what they get stuck on is actually taking action on the ideas and the solutions. So if I were to head to a coffee shop in Madison right now, I'd see a lot of people in the coffee shop on their computers with the Moleskine journals, jotting down ideas, sketching out ideas, but maybe never ever showing anybody these ideas, much less taking action on them. So that is a sticking point for many people. These people sometimes can be very creative, but not creating any innovations, right? They're just in that idea mode. Or the next stage that people get stuck on a lot is following through on continuing to act on the ideas to make them successful. And for me, this is what I do. I love building a new thing and getting the first customers for it. And then I want to build the next thing, and then the next thing, and the next thing. But I don't stick with it to let it to scale and let it to grow. So that's kind of a piece that I get stuck on. And then finally, there's the scaling the impact of the innovation you created. That's a whole nother world there. That's like the startup world where people are trying to get funding from VCs, and they're trying to go big and scale as rapidly as they can, and that is their goal. So that's an interesting area too. And a lot of us just may not be interested in having anything that big, right? But that's something that you see in Silicon Valley is kind of a real value is let's scale as quickly as we can. So it looks like for a lot of our poll, if we show the results, most of the challenge here is following through on continuing to act on the ideas to make them successful, as well as getting started, seeing challenges, problems, and opportunities. All right, so that's helpful. So that'll help us focus this. So the next thing I think to think about is how do you reorganize yourself at a higher level? So if the level that you want to be at is that person that is following through on that idea that's already been successful and keeping it moving, keeping it sustained, how do you reorganize yourself at that level? Or if the level you're trying to get at is being able to get started, right? See the challenges, see the problems, see the opportunities. How do you reorganize yourself at that level to be able to do that? And I think there's a lot of synchronicity and serendipity around here. For example, I told my story about creating the leadership program at William and Mary, and that was like in 2001, I believe. And there was a student in this program named Carl, and he would always come and he would sit in the front row, and he would always come early, and he would come to every single session. And I saw Carl, and I'm like, wow, that's pretty impressive. How do I be more like Carl? How do I reorganize myself at a level like Carl? And then randomly, the other day, I saw in my Facebook newsfeed that Carl was coming to Madison, Wisconsin to speak at the American Marketing Association conference. So I'm like, how random is that? I haven't seen this guy in 12 years. But I sent him a message, and we met up at a coffee shop as soon as he got off the plane yesterday to catch up. But he was a part of that story that I told about my own leadership program. So that's incredible, right? So some of the innovations you create 12 years ago are still branching out and valuable relationships. But how do you reorganize yourself at a higher level, right? So for me, I think about Carl and like, how do I become more like Carl in that aspect where I might want to be like that? So who do you see is at a level you want to be at that can help you? Somebody that's maybe sticking with that idea. And how do you reorganize yourself to be at that level? So what would that look like? And then who are models for you to observe? What similar actions can you take? So for me, I talked about my experience interviewing these innovator leaders. So that was a level I wanted to to learn about and be at. So I ended up finding who these people were on LinkedIn, emailing them, and interviewing them, right? So these were kind of mini models for me, and that was an action that I took to help me to learn to innovate at a higher level myself from some of the best. So, maybe in your mind you have a vision of that, and you have some models out there for you, some people that you would like to emulate a bit and learn from, and how can you actually learn from them and model their behavior a bit, right? But ultimately, with a mindset, the thing that I think about this is we all are getting older, right? We don't get younger. And I remember an old person that I really appreciated back in the day was my grandma. And we were watching the Lawrence Welk show in Winona, Minnesota on PBS. It was a rerun. And a guy on the trumpet just started to go crazy. I might have been one of these guys. He stood up and just went crazy. And my grandma yelled out, "The old boy's still got it in him." And I remember that. I always remember that from a child, that's something that I would like to do. I'd like to take that as a model for me. How do I still have it in me and am still willing to get it out, right? A model, there are models that are all over the place. So for me, sometimes that's something I'm trying to do is how do I keep learning these new technologies? What would that trumpet player do? He'd try it, he'd do it. Can I come on time? Can I sit in the front row like Carl did or other friends, right? So who are these models out there? Little models, for you, big models, maybe somebody even at your William and Mary time that you really appreciated. You'd like to have your behavior be a little like that. Okay. So now what we want to do next is we want to actually create an innovation, right? And to do that, it's going to take a project, right? We just don't want to kind of do it haphazardly. We want to think about a project that we can create. And by actually creating an innovation project and doing it and launching it, we're going to have to use that mindset, right? And maybe our focus is continuing with that idea. So how can that be a focus? Maybe there's an idea we already have out there, and our project is to continue it, to scale it, to move it forward more. So in this project that you might choose, maybe you have something in your mind right now, something you'd like to do, something you'd like to create, something you'd like to develop, something you'd like to take to the next level. It will take your skills, again, of communication, creativity, collaboration, critical thinking. Let's run some experiments with this project to see what might work, right? Because that's the thing with innovation is it's a little different, right, than maybe some of our classes at William and Mary where we could read a lot, we could memorize a lot, and we could answer the right questions on the test. Here's something we're kind of building the bridge as we cross the river here. So you've got to run a lot of experiments and test and get messy and see what might work. So for a project that you would like to do, so this is what I found to be helpful for a mindset, is how do we start small, almost like an acorn, and grow, right? So if there's a project that we want to have, so let's say the project is, I have this expertise on leadership development. I want to create a book about it. Well, that's a pretty big thing, right? It can take maybe a year or two to create a really good book. And you might not end up doing anything because that's so big. So how do you take the big project you have, the future vision you have, the innovation you might like to create that's going to help solve that big problem or challenge, and what is a way to really break it up into the tiniest pieces? Acorn-like pieces. And the nice thing about an acorn is acorn has a capacity to grow when in the right environment and watered, right? So if we can start acorn size, we're able to grow, and we're even able to scale up and out for greater impact, right? So that's the goal. So if you wanted to create a book, could you first create a 2-sentence message and post it on Facebook or LinkedIn? Right, that relates to helping people learn leadership. Some advice you have, right? Could you then create a blog post that's a paragraph, 2 paragraphs in length? Could you then create a guest blog post for another blog that's maybe 4 to 5 paragraphs in length? Could you next create a series of blog posts that you can start to accumulate together into an ebook, right? Before you publish a book. and just release that to people you know, right? So this is the goal for the project that you want to have. How do we start small, like an acorn, and grow so that we can scale up and scale out? So we'll call this an acorn project, right? So the key piece with this project is because there's a lot of smart people at William and Mary. I know a lot of smart people that have this problem, is they want to do the big thing, and they may even get started doing the big thing. But the goal is to do the big thing, and that's almost like the first destination for them. And because that's a goal, something in their mind talks them out of it. So they end up not releasing or launching anything. They set out to achieve a book, and they don't even provide a blog post because of that. So I think the key thing is here is for this project, you've got to figure out what are the really little things that you can do to get it into action. Because when you do, then it's going to grow, right? So like, let's say you want to create your own online school. So that's been something I've been playing around with lately, is an online kind of training or school for innovation with a number of courses. Well, that's a big goal, right? But you don't really start there. I could start by doing a 5-minute video on YouTube, right? I could start by doing a 20-minute Google Hangout. I could also keep going by doing a 60-minute long webinar for a partner like William and Mary, right? I could then take that webinar and record it and add to it and re-edit it and turn it into a very rough online workshop that people can watch with materials. You can keep doing it. You can keep adding to it. And then pretty soon you have an online course, and pretty soon you have a collection of online courses, and pretty soon you have an online school, right? For example. So that's the key, is how do you start in that small acorn way so it can grow? And then who knows, it might become a forest on its own, right? And you're almost developing this habit of innovation, of doing new and different things you haven't done before, communicating publicly, collaborating, creating. You're almost doing things like that. So now let's really get into the mindset. So if you were to create your own innovation project, what do you think has stopped you before from doing something like that? Like, let's say you wanted to write a book and get that out there, or create this new product or this new service or this new program or this new method or solve this big problem. What has stopped you before? What are some thoughts that have stopped you before? And Michael, there's another poll that we can throw down. And if you were to just kind of jot them down, what's coming to your mind on a sheet of paper? So if we can look at the thoughts in our mindset, we might be able to see if they are real, they're rational. And there are a lot of different thoughts that I've heard from people. There's a lot of people that want to be like an entrepreneur. Not necessarily they want to leave their job and have their own business, but they'd like to have their own product or their own service or something like that, right? Start their own service initiative. There's a lot of people that would love to do that, but a thought stops them along the way. And for example, I was working with somebody recently who's really intelligent, great writer, very smart. And I asked her why she hasn't done this before, why she hasn't done this yet, why she hasn't started her own consulting firm or done any blogging or any writing, much less a book or anything like that. And some of the thoughts she told me that she had, I asked her what her thoughts were, and some of the thoughts she said were things like this. So maybe you can identify, but she thought, okay, I'm pretty young. There are others who are more expert than me at this, who know more and can do it better. So she kind of thought she needed to be the best at it, the expert, to be able to help others or serve others. Another thought was, if I have a blog post or do a guest article here, people are going to post negative comments or reviews, and if that happened, that would be pretty devastating to me. Well, that probably won't happen, but hopefully it might in some case, because the more public you get in a larger scale, you get things like that. But it doesn't have to devastate you. It's part of the process. There's critiques. Oh, I'm newer to this. Wouldn't people think I shouldn't be doing it yet? That's another thought that people have, especially some younger people that are holding them back. No, sometimes people really value people that are younger and newer to something. They want that perspective or that opinion. That could be valuable. Or I've never done anything like this before. I don't know how to post an article. So I don't know how to build a website or post an article. Well, that's something you could probably learn. There's some tutorials you could search for on YouTube that'll guide you through how to do it in about an hour or less to create your own website, right? So that's something that can be solved by learning. So when you look at some of these thoughts, are they rational or irrational, right? Sometimes a thought can help us if it's a rational thought and it makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't. Michael, I'm curious to see the results from the poll that people had answered. All right, so let's see here. So mostly, I'm not the expert. This has to be perfect. I had mentioned that one in there. Yeah, so those are two very common ones. I'm not the expert, and this has to be perfect. And that's kind of a pretty common thing that I'm hearing, especially people that have like a William and Mary kind of background or experience or an Ivy League experience. I've done a lot of work with Dartmouth College, and people feel like they need to be the expert, or they've gotten A's and they need to continue to get A's. And that's going to be a very difficult thing in terms of innovation, because when you start, it's really messy. Right? You are making a lot of mistakes. Your first webinar you might do, it might have a lot of grammatical errors, right? Or it may not, the technology may not work. The same with your first blog post or your book, right? You're going to have a lot of that. So it's almost like, how do you see that this is a process? In the early stage of the process is getting in the lab, it's making a mess, and it doesn't have to be perfect, especially at this stage, nor does it ever have to be perfect. And it probably will never be. You take a look at your favorite books on Amazon, and you'll see a wide range of reviews for them, right? Nobody sees something as perfect. And do you have to be the expert? No, there are so many people in the world out there, even in a very small specific topic, that there's room for many, many, many people at different levels to help people at different levels. You just need to be a little bit more expert maybe than the people that you're serving, right? So that's a key thing. So these thoughts, I love checking in this. Thanks, Michael. As many times these thoughts are irrational thoughts or cognitive distortions. They're not things that are true, right? They don't help us. And if we write them down, we can kind of rationalize them a bit. Or if we write them down and share them with somebody and talk to somebody, they might be able to show us a current weakness in our mindset. And you might have a thought that keeps coming up again and again and again for you that's preventing you from taking it to the next level of innovation. So being able to write down those thoughts, argue them yourself, or talk them through with somebody else might help you jump over that hurdle. And I've needed to do this a lot in my life. Every time I've done a book or something big, something that's going to be more public, I've always had to develop the courage to do that. Right. So that's something I think about too, is how do you see if these thoughts are rational? So I'll answer some questions next. I think Michael may have been collecting them and taken some themes and might have some. But as I'm doing that, what do you think are your next steps, right? What's that first acorn you'd like to drop, for your innovation project? If you want more help on how do you, select a project, especially one that might leverage your expertise, and how to do it step by step, from what is your challenge to what key questions can you focus in on, to how do you generate tons of ideas using different methods, to how do you analyze the ideas, synthesize them, conceptualize them, validate which ones could be the most successful for you, and how do you start communicating and launching your idea. That's what the Innovation Step-by-Step book helps you do. It shows an example project. But what do you think are your next steps? What is that project you'd like to do? And what are the first few acorns, the first little actions you might like to take? If it's creating the book, can you provide a little one-sentence tip on Facebook or Twitter today that's going to relate to that book? What's a little action you can take today? So that's my message. And Michael, are there some questions or some themes? Who knows if I'll be able to answer them, but I'm willing to take a stab.
Well, Darin, thank you so much for this fascinating presentation. I know a lot of people really appreciated in the comments on the side here throughout the hour some of your ideas and how you got people thinking innovatively, which I know is your expertise. And so we really appreciate you taking the time to prepare this webinar and to share these ideas with us. Um, uh, Please, as a reminder, for those of you that want to ask questions, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box on the side there, and I'll do my best in the next few minutes to answer as many questions as we have time for. But Darin, one of the things that was very interesting to see with the last question, or I think it was the second to last question, regarding the sort of hurdles that we all have, and I think it was taking that step, taking that action, and I often find that. If you combine that with the perfectionism challenge there, where can you encourage people, especially in their workplace? So, not necessarily starting a company, but how they apply it in their daily routine today, in their jobs at hand. How do they find the time and confidence to uh, think innovatively on an assignment that they're currently tasked with? And what advice would you recommend they take with that acorn step to kind of get things going?
Yeah, sure. So I think in terms of how to think more innovatively with the current work you do, is I always think of it as tools and techniques. Are there some new tools or new techniques you can gain that can help you to do that? Some new thinking tools, right? There's all kinds of idea generation tools and methods. Can use a process. Even if you look at the book cover here, the next time you have a project at work, even just a basic three-stage innovation approach. What is the challenge here? What is the real challenge? What are the ideas that you can create, and what might you launch? What might you take action on? So all kinds of little tools and little techniques and methods, and to gather those and make them your toolbox, I think is something that can be important. In terms of innovation within organizations, one thing that people have got to think about is there's challenges everywhere, whether you're trying to do this as an entrepreneur or you're part of a really big organization. If you're part of a really big organization, the odds are the organization is not designed to help you to innovate. Because a really big organization, especially a bureaucratic organization, has a bureaucracy or all these rules and regulations to essentially not make mistakes, to essentially do the same thing again and again and again, do it the right way, and do it without mistake, right? And that's really different than innovation, where you're inherently going to make mistakes. You're going to take a risk. You're going to make a big mess. There are no rules or regulations for this new thing that you might want to create or do. So to almost have that mindset, if you're in an organization that you need to have a skill, I'll add a couple of C skills, a skill of caring and a skill of courage. So caring, can you care a lot about your customers or the people you're serving? Because if you care a lot about them, you want to solve their problems. You want to apply the latest technologies that they want, that they need, that they're asking of you, right? If you care enough, you'll do that. You'll talk to them. You'll create things, and it might motivate you to navigate the bureaucracy or keep going in the face of no. And also courage, because the organization is not designed to do the new things, really. It's designed to do the same thing again and again. It's going to take courage to pitch a new idea, to suggest a new thing, especially in an instance where that old thing might have to be stopped or go away. So it's going to take courage. It's almost like a hero's journey you'll take in your organization. So that takes a special mindset for being in an organization that might be different than something you're doing as an entrepreneur or just on your own on the side for fun.
Great, thank you, Darin. There was one question earlier that somebody wanted to see one of the slides, and I think it was this slide because of the poll was blocking it. So I hope that everyone that wanted to see that slide can now fully see what you wrote out as your William and Mary experience uh, piece. And then lastly, I wanna give everyone your contact information and website to stay in touch with you, because who knows 12 years from now what person will be knocking on your door for a coffee meeting wherever you will live, Darin, and whatever project they'll be doing, and sharing the good news that how they benefited from this webinar and put in some innovative projects in the future. Before I chime off and officially thank Darin on behalf of everyone, I want to take a second just to ask those of you joining us today and those joining through the recording to take a minute or two before your next activity to fill out this webinar survey. This allows me to really apply all the things that sort of the first, I think it was empathy in the list of process to really learn from all of you what it is that you want. What do you want me to be building for you for your professional success? and emphasize with yep, and so I can start to build that with you and others like Darin together. So now I will conclude and tell Darin, thank you so much for taking the time. I think we could go on and on with questions. I apologize our Q&A time was short, but I think everything that you provided was spot on, and people really appreciate this. So I extend gratitude to you from all of us joining live as well as those watching the recording. Thanks for making us proud of your degree from William & Mary, and we're delighted that you have taken the time to share this expertise with us today.
All right, thanks, Michael. And hey, if people have questions, feel free to email me. I'm pretty easy to find online. I also have a cool little toolkit or a workbook I can send you if you want to start working on your own innovation project, or if you're in Madison, Wisconsin, or flying through yourself, send me an email and we can do coffee too. I absolutely love connecting with fellow William and Mary alums. So pumped that we collaborated on this little innovation of a webinar, Michael. Thank you.
No, go Tribe. And before I conclude, I would be remiss. I need to plug our next webinar, November the 10th, is going to be how to land a job you love. So looking at job searching today, if you're in search of a job or just looking for a change, it will be a great webinar to kind of keep your eyes and ears in the current trends of job searching today, led by an alumna, former recruiter for a company, now is a coach, job search coach, career coach out west, Erin Ewert, and she'll be joining us on November the 10th. And last but not least, homecoming is this weekend. I hope I'll see some of you in Williamsburg wearing your gold and green and gold and being proud graduates. So thanks everyone for joining us for this afternoon, and thank you, Darin, again for all your help and time. And go Tribe.
All right, thank you.